I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to have you along as well. Today is Thursday, June 8th, 2023. Let me start off by saying happy birthday to my oldest daughter, Celine White. Celine, happy birthday. A wonderful day for our family, me and Bobby, and for the world, and all of those. We wish you love and continued success and health and peace and everything that you do. Well, I want to also begin by reminding you that we join our friends at the Minnesota Department of Health to encourage you, viewers, listeners, to continue to follow COVID-19 protocols, meaning wash your hands and stay aware and prioritize prevention. The idea is together we can create awareness, encourage testing, and help everyone stay healthy. So enjoy the show, and remember, get well and get healthy. Stay well, stay healthy. Also, I want to begin by inviting you to support this program, no matter which platform you're connecting on. We're streaming live over the Insight News YouTube channel. We're streaming live over the Black Press USA YouTube channel. We're also streaming on 3 Facebook platforms simultaneously. That's Al McFarlane and Insight News and Black Press USA. And finally, we're streaming live on Twitter and LinkedIn. And we appreciate you for connecting wherever you may be. Shout us out. Go to the comments and say your name, say where you're watching from or checking us out from, and go to the Insight YouTube channel and subscribe, share, and like. Well, we've got a great program today, and I want to begin by bringing my colleague and friend, Dr. Irma McLaurin, in. We'll be also joined momentarily by Yoji Sena, who joins us from Bahia, Brazil. And we're going to be discussing several news items. And then later in the show, we've got a great conversation with a Minneapolis news reporter who's an author as well. You're going to enjoy the conversation with her. It'll be a great program. She's being connecting with us through our work of our book review editor, W.D. Foster Graham. He'll introduce her. Irma, good afternoon. Dr. Irma, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, good to see you. But you just got an honorary PhD, another one, from your alma mater, Grinnell College. Tell us about that, first of all, and congratulations.
Thank you. Well, I actually received 2 awards. I was there last weekend and received the Alumni Award too. This was my 50th college reunion. Yeah. And at the time I entered in 1969, my class of 18 Black students out of 1,200 was the largest number of Black students they had admitted at that time. And so I'm very honored to receive an honorary doctorate. I actually never attended the first commencement because I was short credits and they didn't let you walk across the stage. So this was actually my first graduation. And so I'm now officially with the class of 2023 as the Doctorate of Social Studies or Social Science. Yeah.
You have such a stellar career as a scholar and also as an educator. Take a minute, if you don't mind, just walk us through Dr. Irma McLaurin, because I'm always amazed. I tell you all the time that when I talk to you offline, I never leave the conversation without a headache. And it's a good headache because you have so much to say and you say it so powerfully. It just sends me into deep space every time, and I love that. But just walk our friends through your career quickly.
Well, I have not only 2 PhDs, but I have a terminal professional degree. I have an MFA in English, which is a creative writing degree. So I actually started my career as a poet. And at the time, they were paying $7 a line for publishing poetry. And I was not writing very long poems. And so I thought I needed to get a career. So I started out in admissions. My career has been the many a first. I was the first assistant director of minority affairs at Mount Holyoke College in South Hadley, Massachusetts. And it was a part-time job. And that sort of put me on a career track to work in admissions. I moved, that was 1974. In 1977, I moved to the University of Massachusetts, where I had gotten my degree in 1976, my MFA. And I became a staff assistant in transfer admissions, and then an assistant director, and then an associate director and director of publications. And after I'd exhausted all of those, I crossed over and went into academic affairs, where I became an assistant dean and an adjunct faculty in women's studies. And I was in the area for about 18 years, but during that time, I got to meet and host and cook for people like James Baldwin. Mm-hmm. Sonia Sanchez was at Amherst College, was one of my teachers. Chinua Achebe was at UMass, Shirley Graham Du Bois, Pearl Primus. And so one of the things in my Black Feminist archive, they've digitized 357 of my black and white photographs, of which 50 are people like James Baldwin, Toni Cade Bambara, Sonia Sanchez, Maya Angelou. I got to cross paths with all those people. While I was working as an assistant dean, I started doing research on a Black woman journalist named Leonida McFarlane. She was the first Black and the second woman ever to sit on the editorial board of the Chicago Tribune in 185 years. And in 1984, unfortunately, she committed suicide. Oh. And my interest in her stemmed from the fact that I went to high school with her. I went to an all-girls vocational high school. And I was just very curious about what had triggered that. And so I started doing research on my own on suicide, on identity formation, on, just sort of racial identity and how women in particular form their identity and why someone would take such a radical response. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, people kept saying, you can get a PhD doing this. And I'm like, they'll give me a degree for doing this research. Sure. And so I applied with having taken 0 courses in anthropology into the anthropology department. I was provisionally admitted. And the next year I applied for a National Science Foundation fellowship and received a National Science Foundation Minority Predoctoral Fellowship. And that was in 87, 89, I finished my master's. And in 93, I completed the PhD after doing field work in Belize, Central America. And as they say, the rest is history. I'm now an activist anthropologist, and I was on faculty at the University of Florida. I then worked at the Ford Foundation. I've been deputy provost at Fisk University. And then I came to the University of Minnesota, where I helped to found the UROC, the Urban Research and Outreach Engagement Center.
What a wonderful career. What a wonderful story. I just remember being floored on many of our conversations when you told me that James Baldwin, one of my heroes as a writer and as a thinker, and was a guest in your home.
Yes, I cooked for him.
You actually knew James Baldwin.
Yeah.
So, it's good to share these stories. It shows you and tells you, reminds you that we have been and we are accessible to each other. And that even the people that we hold in deep admiration are people, and yes. They want to be engaged as people, not as icons. And so you deliver that kind of intimacy in your storytelling. And take the last minute, Dr. Irma, to talk about the Black Feminist Archive. That's so important.
One of the things that I was struck by as I did research, I've done research on Zora Neale Hurston for about 3 decades. And when I would go into the archives, I was struck by what was missing, her field notes. And I kept thinking, well, what happened to them? How do we sort of know her as an anthropologist? And so it became this investigation. And a lot of it was buried in her letters, because if she did have field notes, they had long disappeared. But she wrote correspondence to Langston Hughes in which she described coming to Magazine, Alabama, which I'm actually sitting in right now. Plateau and Magazine are across the way from each other, and finding Cujo, who was part of the Clotilda group of The Descendants, which is a Netflix documentary now. And today I was interviewing, I'm going to be writing something, Miss Lorna Woods, who is her father, her grandfather was actually related to Cujo. And she has created a museum about, information and materials to tell the story. And people have said to her, they want to buy her stuff. She has the actual slave chains that they were enslaved with. She's got whips that they were whipped with, that she said her mother kept underneath her mattress. And people have come and tried to buy this stuff or take it. And she just says, I want Black children to know the history, and I'm preserving it for us. And her story is so powerful. I mean, I was here for like almost 3 hours, you know?
Well, there's so many powerful stories. This is really reconnecting and elevating history that we thought was lost, that they intended us to forget, but we have not. I mentioned before the show, I'm reading this book. I'm halfway through, but this is an author who's in your town, and you've met him. I think you've talked to him.
Yes.
And you'll be interviewing him. The book is called Re-Embracing Africa, and it's a piece by Brother John H. My glasses are gone. Bacon II, and answering African drums from the coffin Clotilda. He refers to Clotilda and all of the ships that transported Africans as coffins. Great conversation.
And just very briefly, I think part of what I've been doing, my archive is located at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I've sent them 120 boxes of material, and I still have stuff to send. But what I'm doing is really recruiting other Black women, and men can be in it too, trans people, to let them know that the work that they've done as activists, as artists, as writers, as scholars, as just ordinary people is important and needs to be preserved. Because if we don't take the time to preserve our materials, as Ms. Lorna is doing, then nobody else is going to do it for us. And that's really one of my agenda items.
Well, Irma, so good to catch up with you as always. Let me bring in our friend from Bahia, from Brazil, Brother Yoji Sena. Yoji joins us regularly from Bahia and is editing the section of the paper called Afrodescendientes, and we're doing more projects together as well. Brother Yoji, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How about you guys? Congratulations, Dr. Irma.
Thank you.
I was very surprised by your connection with Cujo and also James Baldwin. It's like, wow, you know.
Well, really... you know, and the beauty of it is that Bahia has the story too of the transport of African people. There are more of us in Bahia, in Brazil, than in North America.
That's
and one of the things that I kind of have just been astounded by is our lack of knowledge about the breadth and depth of this human tragedy called the transatlantic slave trade, and that more of us ended up in the Caribbean and in South America than North America. But our social structure has induced a sleep over our minds and our eyes, and allowed only a thin sliver of awareness. The awareness that we, in a sense, mistakenly bring to each other is that our lives, our history simply happened in 1619, or when the first slave ships came to the shores of North America, United States. And we, as a people, from my point of view, are not really conscious of the connections that exist between us here and us in the Caribbean and us in South America. And so Yoji has joined with me in creating a special approach to discussing our stories. And we are presenting on a regular basis and insight stories that appear in multiple languages, including Portuguese and Spanish and Yoruba, Swahili, in French, and in English as well. And so the idea is to recognize that we engage and arrive through a variety of idioms, and we own them all. All of them belong to us, and we use these idioms to create meaning making in the world. So it's a wonderful time to be connected and associated. Yoji, let me ask you to start with responding to one of the two articles I pulled up today for starting with our program. And I don't know if you've read the story or not, but one of them is a story about Ajike AJ Owens. She was fatally shot after knocking on a neighbor's door. And according to an article that was published on CNN, the article says, "Here's what we know." It's an article written by Christine Maxcourt, I think it is, like Maxort, a CNN reporter, updated yesterday, June 7th. And I'll just read the first couple of paragraphs, but I'll ask you both to talk about it or to contextualize it. It says that it's been 4 days since 35-year-old Ajike AJ Owens was shot and killed in Central Florida after knocking on a neighbor's door. Owens' family says the shooter, identified by police reports as only as a 58-year-old white woman, harassed the black mother and her children and had called them racial slurs prior to the killing. The family says they won't begin to see justice until Owens' killer is arrested and charged. A woman was taken into custody Tuesday night in connection with the shooting. Marion County Sheriff's spokesman Valerie Strong said it's unclear whether the woman has been formally arrested or charged. Had you seen this story, Irma or Yoji? Had either of you heard this or watched it on the news, first of all?
Well,
Yes, I'm aware
it
of
certainly it certainly started on Twitter, and I did comment on Twitter about it. And I think part of it is that there is this attitude among whites that, one, it is their job to surveillance, to sort of manage our behavior. And when they are the aggressor, what often happens is that there are severe repercussions if we respond to that. And the police assume that they're innocent until proven guilty. Had it been the reverse and a black person had shot this woman, they would have immediately been arrested. They would have been charged. This is the second time that someone has been shot for just knocking on a door. And the police response has been to let that person be okay at home until there's an outcry. So we tremendously have a problem with the police. We thought that things had ended with Michael, with George Floyd, that the police departments would sort of get their stuff together. But in fact, it's almost like they're regressing in terms of how they respond to these situations where whites are the aggressor.
Yoji, how's it look to you when you read the story that we sent you, or put in the context of what you experience, what we experience in the hemisphere, in the diaspora? What are your thoughts?
Yes, I was aware, I think almost right after came out on the news. You know, I watch news from all over the world regularly, you know, and again, it's outrage, the feeling once again, and when it's gonna stop, when we're gonna
Yes.
have some sort of uh, when you're gonna be able to live a normal human life without being looking out in our bags, without being, uh, controlled by others, because of the simple fact that to them being black equals to you be a suspicious person. You know, the same thing happens here, as Dr. Irma says, seems to be regressing. All these social gains that was achieved by black people worldwide. In Brazil, almost daily, you hear cases that are outrageous. You know, I mean, if this was in the United States that happens, would be all over the news worldwide, like something like happened with George Floyd, happens here constantly, you know, and it happens so often that people in certain way also, it's numb to it, you know, it's
Yes.
like, you know, so like 2 days ago, a homeless person um, was suspect of theft in a market. He was apprehended by police. He was taken to the hospital because he was, erratic, combative. But what the police did, he was hog-tied, hands and legs in the back, and carried like a luggage
Mm-hmm.
and thrown in the back. Because here you travel not sitting in the police car, you go in the baggage compartment. That's how it is. So this case of this lady in Florida, you know, um, I don't know, makes me feel to have superpowers, be able to, you know, in certain way, go and exact justice in certain way instead of waiting all these circles. As Dr. Irma say also, only when there is some outcry is when people start paying attention and start to have moral positions about it. But always, if you notice, always with a little pinch of doubt, you know. So probably this woman is gonna be soon be diagnosed with some mental illness.
That's right.
You know,
That
it's
will
what
become an
it's,
excuse for
yeah,
her
that's what
to
here they
receive
do all the
leniency.
time.
Yes.
And there is not going to be any structural change to anything. So the number is going to continue to be piling, and something needs to be done.
We
We
are
just
at
found out,
risk.
Irma, we
We are
just found out that
yes.
the woman has been charged. Her name is Susan Louise Lomax, I think.
With murder or with manslaughter?
Charged with shooting another woman. That's all I see right now on the note that I have.
Okay. And it'll be interesting.
Manslaughter.
See, because murder suggests premeditation. This woman was murdered. This woman deliberately set out to kill her, which means that it was premeditated. That's not manslaughter. Manslaughter is when you accidentally, you didn't set out to do it. It was something that was spur of the moment. This woman deliberately decided to shoot her. And so and that's what we're going to see is the outcry is going to be, she needs to be charged with murder. This was a murder. It was not a manslaughter. It was murder. And what is happening is that it is very dangerous for us. I mean, I am thinking of the trauma of this woman's child who had to sit and watch her mother die. This little girl is going to be traumatized for life. And her mother was simply trying to respond to a person who had been aggressive towards her child. So white people get to respond to anyone being aggressive towards their children, but Black people don't. And it is that is very harmful and and upsetting, and basically the justice system, the legal system is failing Black people. We thought we had made a turn. We are going backwards.
Let me pivot from there to the other story I've got for us to talk about, and that's the one that involves our friend, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. He's announced a new lawsuit against the city of St. Paul's largest downtown property owner for worker overtime pay. And this story, according to the St. Paul or Twin Cities Pioneer Press, says that 6 whistleblowers came forward alleging that they worked as many as 142 hours in 2 weeks without time and a half pay, which is required by the law. Picture is of Park Square Court, which is a residential building downtown. The headline of the photograph says that on Monday, June 5th, Keith Ellison filed a lawsuit against Madison Equities, a downtown St. Paul property owner, the largest, in fact, and his lawsuit alleges that the company deprived security officers of mandatory overtime wages by having them punch in and out of separate subsidiary companies associated with its buildings. So devious. And the article by Frederick Meld at the Pioneer Press says that a 31-page lawsuit filed Monday in Ramsey County District Court also maintains that the property management company retaliated against 1 of 6 workers who raised whistleblower concerns about their practice. Attorney General's efforts to obtain the payroll data and other documentation were stymied by rounds of legal objections from Madison Equities, which rose to the Minnesota Supreme Court. The state's highest court sided with the AG's office in December of 2021, sending the case back to district court for supplemental data requests. And one of Ellison's people, John Stiles, said, "We originally announced an investigation in the fall of 2019, and instead of complying with the civil investigative demand. They fought and fought and fought. And finally, the state Supreme Court reinforced our authority to seek this information. We feel we have enough information to sue this out. And so we just talked about how the system is sort of stacked and still disserves us. But in my mind, Dr. Emmy-award, the presence and the work of a lawyer and leader like Keith Ellison remains the ray of hope. And, we can go back and talk about, I think, the global impact of his charging Derek Chauvin and the other Minneapolis police officers, and also the Brooklyn Park situation in which another young black man was killed. But he's charged. He promised he was going to charge companies that work against the interests of the citizens of Minnesota. In this case, it's workers. This one doesn't say black, it's just workers who are being deprived of overtime pay. I think we have to read into that likely some of those workers are black people. And so do you agree with me that this is one of the things that we should take hope in? And how do we support this energy in the midst of this recalcitrance or this retreat from this progressive path we've been on to ensure more civil and human rights? Dr. Irma, what do you think?
Well, first, I would say, kudos to Attorney General Keith Ellison. And unfortunately, there are not enough of him to go around. Can we clone him and send him out into the world? I think this is what justice systems are supposed to do, but not what they do. And so clearly leadership is important in this. And the reason this is such an interesting story is that I was reading in the Mobile paper, Laganapi is the name, makes no sense, but it's not spelled how it's pronounced, about police who have earned as much as $200,000 a year from overtime when they were doing simple data entry. So we see the abuse of power, and then we see how those in power seek to disenfranchise, other people. We need more leaders. I hope that, every law student of whatever persuasion they happen to be racially is taking notice of that it takes courage. There's no question in my mind that people, as we saw when Ellison was running for office, they started pulling into his personal issues. They started bringing out. So there will be an attempt to block people like him. And so people need to understand that when you're running for public office, everything that you do is open. It's an open book. And that you need to figure out how you live your life. If you want to be a champion of the people, then you actually have to have a way to do that puts you above suspicion. And that means you have to start early. You can't wait until you're ready to run for office. But I think he's a magnificent role model and a leader. And I hope he continues to move forward in his career, not just for Minnesota.
For the country, maybe for the world as well.
Absolutely.
And Yoji, this resonates in my conversations with you because we talk about the political change afoot in Brazil and in South America. And the question becomes, how do people often get disadvantaged by things in their past? And how do they rise above them? How do they figure out ways to be transparent, open, and still move towards an agenda that is progressive and that is based on, human rights, human decency, civil rights, empowering of the people? And so when you see Keith Ellison, for example, in Minnesota, standing up to big companies, big corporations, and also standing up against power institutions of government, like the county prosecutor, for example, or the county government in Hennepin County, where the George Floyd case was tried. How does that relate to how you see our people engaging in politics and political change where you are?
Well, here, just now, we are in a time of turning point where you see Black people everywhere now in positions of visibility. For example, the most watched national network, it's Global TV, which is one of the biggest TV networks in the world. Um, they they have a lot of black journalists on camera. You you see one or two presenting the main shows, but you have much more visibility than ever. As far as politics, we are not represented in any chamber of our elected politicians here proportional to the population. That here, undoubtedly, we are majority. So there is much more numbers now. Uh, but even now, with the new government that is, I would say, center left, they are claudicating. I don't know if that's a word that is used oftenly in English, but they are uh, not be certain how they do. So, for example, last week we have the Minister of Environment, that is Marina Silva. She's a black woman from the forest, from the state of Acre. She was also assistant to Chico Mendes. I think you guys know who he was. He was uh, one of very strong advocate for the Amazon against deforestation that was killed. And she's the minister of the environment, also the Ministry of Indigenous People. They basically got taken their power away. So they kind of um, hold the title, but they are incapable of doing things because their main attributions of their ministries were transferred to other autarchies. So um, the stuff of digging on past of people in Brazil still didn't catch up because otherwise, I think most of our representatives wouldn't be where they are right now. So the stuff of digging the past of people um, is not that much used yet. Probably will, but there is blatant political assassinations uh, to people who are perceived to be a possible threat to the status quo if they are elected. You know.
Yogi and Dr. Irma, I have the personal belief that our progress anywhere is connected to our visible, our knowledge of progress everywhere. And that's why, to me, it's important to have these bicontinental conversations, Brazil and Minneapolis, Minnesota. And as often as not, we've also connected with each other and our colleagues in either Europe or in continental Africa. And so I come out of this idea of being what I perceived myself as a Pan-Africanist, and with a feeling and a desire that, and a belief that that somehow we have to elevate and create a vision that reflects our connectedness. And that vision reflecting connectedness throughout the African diaspora also allows interaction. The interactions can be transactional, spiritual, social, educational, but all told, the interactions should reflect and reveal our sacredness, the sacred relationship we have to the Creator, to creation itself, and our responsibility and our right to speak to what it means to be a human being on the planet. So it's a, and I don't know if I'm just blowing smoke in my own head, or if this is the right place, the right way to be thinking. But that's how I feel, and I always want to ask my guests, and you particularly, Dr. Irma and Brother Yogi, how do you see us making progress across the planet by being with each other differently and being knowledgeable of our interaction with each other? What do you think?
That's a big question, Al. I would say poca a poca, little by little. I mean, I think, we have to start early. I think we have to start exposing our youth to global issues and travel so that they understand that their world, their culture, their society is not the center of the universe. I think that helps. I think my exposure early on helped me to understand differences, and that I could see when I went, one was just leaving Chicago when I was 16 to go to the Yale Summer High School, and just being exposed to different kinds of people from the reservation, people who were Puerto Ricans from Brooklyn, poor whites from Louisiana, and having that exposure helped me to understand that my, what I was experiencing, one, there were lots of iterations of that. So it wasn't just about me. And it gave me exposure to talk to other people about their experience and to understand that everybody who was poor was not always black, which I didn't know because I lived in an all black environment. Um, to understand, I mean, I lived in Chicago that was not far from what was really a Puerto Rican neighborhood, and never met a Puerto Rican until I got to Yale Summer High School in 1968, right at 16. So it took me 16 years. And then I became more sensitive to the fact that there were different kinds of communities. And I used to do a workshop when I moved to Nashville with a sister from the Dominican Republic. And we would talk about sort of Black and Latino sort of interactions and engagements, because up to that point, I wanted people to understand that there were Afro Latinos. People didn't realize that, because everyone, if they saw a Latino, they looked like, Rita Morena, and so they thought they were all light skinned. And to understand that their understanding of Blackness and their history of Blackness was different from ours. There were some overlaps. Clearly, we came through the Atlantic slave trade, but how that took off and what Blackness looks like, and when people have a national identity, which we've really struggled to get, but people see themselves as Brazilian, not just Black Brazilians, but Brazilians, or, Panamanians, or, Peruvians. They see themselves in ways that we don't have a national identity like that, to gain understanding about that. And so I think starting young, getting our children exposed is going to be crucial.
Yoji, what do you think? I'm going to finish this up.
Yes, actually today I'm agreeing everything with Dr. Irma. That is, this work should be start to be done in the schools,
Yes.
right? It should be clearly African curricula to let them know since young about. So, for example, 2/3 of African Americans, meaning Black people who lives in the United States today, they are descendants of people who came from Brazil. They first were
And
here.
we don't know that.
You don't know that. And today I was remember about you, El, when I was reading about Rita Marlin. So she was born in Santiago de Cuba,
Which is where my father was born. Yep.
yeah. So I was like, whoa, it was really a moment that was like, I've been a fanatic of reggae for a long time, and that information never permeated before to me. So to know that we are interconnected still today. So many of these African Americans that are there, they are or descendants of those involuntary immigrants, meaning the enslaved people. Also, there is many that are descendant of from the 20th century on immigrants that became African American, like my kids. No, my kids, for example, they are in a certain way homogenized as an African American, but they do have a component that they are part Afro-Brazilian. And you are right, we do have a pride here in certain way in wearing this nationality that we are
Yes.
Brazilians, also Afro-Brazilian, but we are Brazilians. We feel and express love to our country, Uh, Perhaps, maybe because we have less information about the atrocities, or because here in Brazil, the government historically has pushed the idea of racial democracy, or as we call here now, cordial racism. So the racism in Brazil, it's overall much in certainly cordial, but you do,
Insidious.
yeah, but you do also find a lot of cases
Yes.
of atrocities, as I mentioned, daily. Still, you find in cases that the police are rescuing people from modern day slavery
Slavery.
in 2023 in Brazil in urban areas. Not yeah, many cases are in rural areas on plantations where crop harvest people, but these are happening too on urban areas. Like 2 days ago, one of the judges of the state of Santa Catarina, he was discovered that he hold a woman in his house for 20 years. She's a mute. She never have any assistance or as far as education or medical or helping her with disability. And this person had the the gall of saying that actually this is his actual word. Actually, what he did was a case of piety by bringing in to his house this woman.
Mm.
So this woman now being rescued by there is task forces about modern day slavery here,
That's
and she
the great,
even with
great
some,
white savior saving
yes,
the poor
yes,
ignorant. Let me switch. We're down to the last couple of seconds here, but I want to make note that the news in terms of Brazilian culture is acknowledging the passing of the singer Astrid Gilberto. Uh, she's
Yes.
a major force in the music. Tell, tell something about her and what her
well,
work has done with the culture, for the culture.
well, she's also she's from Bahia, coincidentally, but she is European,
Mhm.
and we have in certain way very mixed emotions about the idea of bossa nova, because we black people here in Brazil say bossa nova it's white people samba, it's
Mhm.
samba with water, you know. So it's where they take all the exuberance and make that subdued and cool kind of approach, but the rhythm is not a new rhythm,
Mhm.
you know. And the term bossa nova, right, means a new, for example, a black person that is proud and it's exuberant. They in Portuguese they call boçal, right?
Mm.
It's a pejorative term, uh, and bossa comes from the same root word, so it's a new form of being, you know, uh, seen. But all the rhythmicality, the music, the ideas, it's black, and who took over and became the official rhythm of Brazil in the 60s and the 70s. Because we have here Brazilians in general, principally white Brazilians. We called um, síndrome de vira-lata. Vira-latas are the street dogs, right?
Mhm.
Uh, street dog syndrome, where principally white Brazilians think that anything that comes from outside of Brazil, principally coming from Europe or United States, is maximum. So that was in certain way an approval. Brazilians, white Brazilians, feel very elated when foreigners recognize
Mhm.
us.
Mhm.
So bossa nova, in certain way, you know the black bossa nova players, you don't hear about them at all.
Mhm.
All the icons of bossa nova were white Brazilians. So Astrud Gilberto, she married João Gilberto, that also is from Bahia. That is given the the title that he's the creator of bossa nova. So Bossa Nova it's more of a movement than a rhythm, because the rhythm
Mm.
is samba played quietly,
Mhm.
you know. So,
Listen,
and Stan Getz was another American white person who brought her and João Gilberto. So we don't claim very much the Bossa Nova and Astrud Gilberto and João Gilberto and Tom Jobim and Sergio Mendes, all these people. mm,
cultural appropriation.
Nacimiento, is there
oh,
Nacimiento?
that's another,
That's
you
the
know,
real deal,
Story.
Milton. Yeah.
that's another story.
Listen,
And
we got to wrap this
finally,
up.
he was raised by a white family.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, that I just
Okay.
found recently too.
Yeah. Let's wrap this up because I want to bring in our next guest, who is an author that you're going to love. So I'll put you guys back in the back room, and I want to bring in W.D. Foster Graham, who's our books editor. W.D., thank you again, and as always, for reaching out and connecting with people in the book world. And take a minute and introduce Shayla Michelle. And bring Shayla
Thank,
in. Go ahead.
thank you, Al. Well, for those of us who live in the Twin Cities metropolitan area of Minnesota, you would know our guest author as the news anchor for WCCO TV's Midday News. She is a graduate of Northwestern University. She majored in broadcast journalism, and her work earned her an Emmy Award. She is a networker. Of course, she had facilitated, it was called a Let's Chat series during the pandemic. She is a uh, community activist. She mentors, but her gifts don't stop there. She has written a children's book called Echo in the Distance, which combines the elements of being a children's book, historical references, and the spoken word. So it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce to you our guest author today, Shayla Michelle.
Hey,
Hi, thank
Shayla.
you. Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to join you today.
Well, thank you for being here. It's such a pleasure to have you here. And I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk to you.
Mhm.
And what WD and I are going to do is just sort of give you the opportunity to talk about your work, your book. And we want
Oh,
people to be
sure.
aware of it and to engage. And I'll ask you about your background as a journalist. I'm always applauding any of us who make moves in the profession. But tell us about the
Oh.
book, first of all. Why don't you describe the book, the vision, the mission?
Well, sure. Well, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a community activist. I would say more of a community connector. If I would describe myself, I would say I'm a creative, deep thinker who loves to laugh and help other people see the best of who they are. News is what I do. It's not who I am, but as a person, I try to use the tools and talents that I have to the best of my ability to hopefully engage, encourage, inspire people, and hopefully leave people feeling a little more connected to each other, hopefully through news, and then hopefully through my passion now through creative writing. So this is my book. This journey for me started a little over 20 years ago when I was a freshman at Northwestern University. I was a creative writer before a journalist was even what I knew I wanted to be. I remember being in middle school and having, I think people, if you think back, who was your favorite teacher? I think everybody may have that one teacher growing up that for them was the one that connected with them more than others. For me growing up, that teacher was Miss Norval, and she was the one that encouraged me to write. And so I always had a passion for writing. And when I was a freshman at Northwestern University, they had a written expression competition for all the students on campus. And the winner of that competition had a chance to perform their piece for Northwestern's 2003 MLK Day festivities. So I was selected as the winner for that competition, had a chance to perform my piece. Then, like anything that you don't use for years, it collects dust. But I always really enjoyed the language of this piece. And it was always in the back of my mind to turn this. I said, what could this be if I turned it into an illustrated book? Because I always thought that the language just, it was just very vibrant and beautiful and descriptive. And I just thought that the right illustrator could really create something meaningful with my words. So I sat on it for many years. And of course, as a college student, you don't always have the finances to create the dreams in your head. But that situation for me changed as an adult. And I said, instead of just sitting on these ideas and these dreams that I have, let me do something with them. So last year, I decided, after I think what people do sometimes, you have ideas and you kind of put them on the back burner and you say, oh, I'll do this first, or maybe I'll do this later. And I said, I'm going to just stop waiting. I know this is something I want to do. Let's do it now. And it was really important for me to create space in this process for someone else who may benefit from any exposure that my book project might have. I don't have a huge platform, but I wanted to extend in any way if another artist might benefit from any exposure that Echo in the Distance might have. I wanted that limited platform of mine to benefit an artist in some way. So while I was on social media, I happened to click on a profile on Instagram, and these beautiful images were on the next page. I reached out to the artist, Capricia Ambers. She had never done a children's book. For months, we worked together for 7-8 months, the actual creative process, through a very thoughtful process, through email, text messages, phone calls. We crafted what I feel is a very thoughtfully illustrated book. The best words that I can think of as a description of the illustrations, someone said that the pages have souls, the illustrations have souls. And that was very meaningful to me, because I think that some of the conversations that we've had with each other and the process of deciding what the illustration should be, I think that some of the people reading the book will have those conversations with each other. This originated as a spoken word piece that we turned into an illustrated book. And so it's a little bit of a different process, I think, how it started. And so for me, as the person putting this together, I feel that I could have gone a different route to get to this book. I could have kept knocking on doors and hoping that maybe a traditional larger publisher would have seen my vision for this piece. But what I was doing, I felt, may have been a little bit outside of the box for what was necessarily being done. And so it's either you create opportunities where they don't exist to do the things that you want to do, or you keep, knocking on doors, hoping that someone sees your vision. And so I've always been the former. And it was really important to me to create this vision. This was something that I wanted to do. So to be in a position to be holding this in my hand is, for me, realizing a dream. But I also hope that holding my dream for someone else in their hand inspires them to go out and realize whatever their dream is for them. Because I can't be the only person that's standing out there with something that they want to do. For me, it was writing a book, or publishing a book rather. But maybe for someone else, there's some other idea or some other, what if I could, at the end of that sentence, that they're not doing. And maybe for a reader, that this book can be for them that catalyst to go out and try whatever that is for them. I think one of the stories that connected with me, or has connected with me through this process, back in 1963, when Dr. King had delivered his I Have a Dream speech, he had planned remarks for that day for the audience at the March on Washington. And it was gospel singer Mahalia Jackson who heard his words that day and felt that there was something missing in the message to that crowd. And she had heard him speak of the dream and said, that's what, oh, what's that?
I think the night before he had talked about the dream, but go ahead.
Yeah, she had heard him speak of it before, and she said, that's what this audience needs to hear. And so she said, tell them about the dream, Martin. And so he comes out of the pages and just speaks from the heart and improvises this message that has resonated and connected with generations over time. And so my hope, in a very small way, is just this book inspires people who are reading it to come out of the pages, have real conversations with other people around them, and be inspired to tell us about their dream. Because I hope that one person reading my book is inspired to go out and do that thing in their head that may make the world that we're living in now a little bit better, because they were inspired to go out and do something.
I want to hear your voice. I'm intrigued by your delivery of spoken word to the page. And so all kinds of things go through my head as you're speaking. One is what your trajectory was, and when and how did you see yourself and act as a spoken word artist? What does spoken word mean to you? How did it bring you into that idiom, is what I'll call it? But would you read some of your favorite favorite parts of it?
Sure. I'll just read a little bit from the beginning for you and get to part of it.
Okay.
He bellows boldly. The sweet sound of anticipation rolls from tongue to lips to dance in a distant echo. His body trembles as his words flow freely into air, voice tearing into tangled blue skies, parting thick clouds of ignorance with words resonating towards the sun. Do you hear the echo in the distance? It runs within the crowded river of watchers gushing through the horizon, waves of endless observers edging it onward. Just look as they roar. Watch their hands ring wild with applause. Watch their eyes gleam glad with the promise that tomorrow's sun should yield a brighter day. Just watch. His eyes so stern of fearless design, unwavering in the surge of promise that arises. He looks ahead. The creep crawl of tremulous times is mounting in the wind.
Wow.
Oh my God.
I wish that I was in the audience when you shared that.
Amazing. Go ahead, WD.
So now, since we have time, I know you're going to be launching your book on Juneteenth. Let us know about the events around it.
Oh, sure. So many exciting things coming up, and there'll be more activities if you don't make it to all the Juneteenth activities, more things rolling out through the summer. But on June 17th, I'm going to be at Bethune Park participating in the Juneteenth Speak festivities. I'll have an author signing from 1 to 3 p.m., so you can get your hands on the book a couple of days early. I'll have a limited supply of books there in person that I'll be signing, taking pictures, giving hugs, all the things we can do now that we're coming out of COVID. So I am so excited about that because I've had a lot of hugs to give since I've been here a couple years. On the 19th, I will be in North Minneapolis from 1 to 3 at Wilson's Image Barbers and Silas, having a community conversation with my news cousin, Reg Chapman, and my illustrator, Capricia Ambers. And we'll be talking about some of the pieces that we've talked about today, the process of getting the book together, her work as an illustrator and her process. It'll be kind of a neat conversation about dreams, dreaming big, and not being afraid to go out and conquer.
And we're out of time. And we're out of time. Look.
Oh, sorry. And then the last one, Modern Well, that evening from 6 to 7:30.
Super. This has been so wonderful. We'll do it again. Let's do it. Shayla, thank you so much. WD, as always, thank you. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.